What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily, where we will discuss the second most embarrassing thing that happened on television Thursday night. Cardinals lose to the Reds in the series opener at Busch, 11-4, the final. Miles Mikolas, about as bad as we have ever seen him. Gave up 10 runs, 9 of them were earned. Yeah, that's going to do a dent in the old ERA. He had been slowly but surely building it back toward respectable, and it's gone. Miles Mikolas goes 4 1/3, gives up 12 hits, 10 runs, 9 of them earned. Only one home run. Guess it must have been the soft contact this time. No, he knows that he had a bad game. And we'll listen to a little bit of Mikolas audio from postgame courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest. Miles Mikolas knows that this was an ugly one and that, frankly, he didn't quite do his job because the bullpen has been a little more taxed recently. Cardinals have played a bunch of games in a row, and then you get an off day, but it's only because the next day you're playing a doubleheader. Thank goodness for what Libby did on Wednesday night. If you want to just be happier about the world, go back and listen to yesterday's podcast, if you missed it, talking Matthew Liberatore. And the thing of it is, like, after a start like this by Miles Mikolas, my first inclination is, man, you got to be kidding me if they don't give Matthew Liberatore another shot in this rotation, because I don't think Matthew Liberatore on his worst day is doing what happened tonight to Mikolas. Maybe I could be wrong about that. But the other part of that is, like, the Cardinals are not going to replace Mikolas in the rotation. Not only are they not going to do that this year, they're not going to do it next year either. I know I've got a lot of that sentiment in the YouTube comments of people saying, you know, why is he here? Why is Miles Mikolas just considered a mainstay for this team? Well, they did sign him and extend him, and you can grade the quality of that extension and the timing of it and ask questions about that. I think that's completely fair. But the reality is that Miles Mikolas had been much better recently prior to Thursday night's just complete meltdown at Busch Stadium. And they tried to get him through 5 innings because of the state of the bullpen and the reality that they need to try and get guys a little bit deeper. It's a balance. Again, yesterday I talked about Ollie Marmol having a good reason to want to pull starters when he has at times this year, and seemingly a little bit earlier than most fans would have recommended or would have wanted to see in some of those instances. But what we're talking about here with Mikolas is a completely different conversation because he was non-competitive on Thursday night. So in those spots, it's, all right, can you just help out a little bit? Like, the game is, you know, we all have eyes. The game is pretty much a wash at a certain point as it unravels on Mikolas. Can you just get through 5 in order to spell the bullpen a little bit and make this not as big of a disaster as it sort of feels like it is? And ultimately, you know, he did pitch into the 5th inning, but not so successfully. As you look up and down the box score there for the Cincinnati Reds, yeah, they scored in each and every inning in which Miles Mikolas threw a pitch tonight. So just a really bad start. And like I said, he knew as much, he said as much, but it's still disappointing to see when the trajectory had been more positive for him before this one. His last time out against the Giants was 6 innings, 4 runs, so a little bit short of a quality start, but it was still acceptable. Like, that's a game that keeps your team in it, and lo and behold, the Cardinals did win that game. They got a lot of push from the offense in a 9-4 win in that game about a week ago. And previous to that, I mean, you could rattle it off for Mikolas. 6 1/3, 1 run. 7 innings, 0 runs. 6-2, 6-3, 6-3, 5-1, 6-3. I mean, that is a nice little stretch of calendar there for Mikolas where he hadn't blown up. He didn't have an outing like he did on May 7th, allowing 6 runs in only 4 innings. He didn't have any outings like he did 3 different times in the month of April, or I guess technically the first one was March 28th. But that first month of the season where he had 3 times where he failed to get through 5 and gave up 5 earned runs in each of those games. Like, we hadn't seen that version of Mikolas, and that's a frustrating version to see. Tonight, though, was so far beyond anything that we had seen so far from him this season. I mean, it was just an absolute consistent barrage. Everybody in the Cincinnati Reds lineup pretty much ate in this game. Their catcher, Maley, is the only guy who did not record a hit, Luke Maley, that was in the starting lineup. 2 hits for India. Ellie De La Cruz had a 3-for-5 game. He had a triple. He was doing a little bit of everything. Spencer Steer took him deep. That was the homer. Just up and down this lineup, former Cardinal Nick Martini. I don't know if Martini ever got to the big leagues with the Cardinals, but former Cardinal farmhand had a knock. Noelvi Marte had 3 hits. Everybody ate for the Cincinnati Reds tonight. Benson and Fairchild had multi-hit games. 16 hits on the night for the Cincinnati Reds. And it was just kind of looking like a beach ball to him, I think, is the way that you'd describe it. I mean, there is something about the delivery by Mikolas, and I have talked about this before. I know that he throws sliders and throws curveballs with relative frequency, but when he hangs those pitches, it is unbelievable how hittable those pitches appear to be to these batters at the plate. I mean, it's like he's reaching out, and the delivery is just saying, here's what's going to be. It's going to be a hanger. Be ready and wallop it, as Chip Carey would say. And they did tonight. The Cincinnati Reds, I mean, you watch the highlights of the biggest swings by the Reds. Look, there were some hits that you go, oh, man, that kind of snuck through, or that one got into the gap instead of just, if you hit it anywhere else, it's a harmless single. So that happens. But, I mean, when you give up 12 hits, some of them are going to be earned and some of them are going to be a little cheaper. But there was plenty that was not cheap against Miles Mikolas tonight. And largely, sometimes it's coming on those pitches that are well located, but if the guys are just seeing you well and seeing the ball well out of your hand, there's some guys who are deceptive, right? Where you can't quite pinpoint what it is, but you hear the phrase, well, he just don't see the ball well out of his hand. He just does something that Mikolas is like the opposite of that when he's getting shelled. You see everything. It's very evident. It's like he's got a neon sign that tells you the pitch that's coming. I'm not saying he was tipping. I have no idea. It's just, it feels so comfortable. It feels like a comfortable at bat for these guys on the days where it goes wrong for Mikolas. And maybe that's like an obvious statement that anybody who's struggling on the mound is going to appear to be that way to the guys in the box. But for whatever reason, it strikes me more so with Mikolas than it does with other pitchers on their bad days. On his bad days, it's like, yep, that he lollipops the curve in there. It's not fooling anybody, and so they just can sit back and wait on it. So that was sort of the way it went for him. And at a certain point, you just realize he didn't have his best stuff, and so it's almost unfair to continue to judge him because in other circumstances, you'd like him out of the game much earlier than he left the game. But for those that are going to say, oh, Ollie should have took him out, like, okay, sure, but you're down 2-0. Okay, you're down 5-0. Then Arenado hits the homer to kind of sort of get you back in it for a moment. Do you take Mikolas out after 3 because of Arenado's homer, where you say, hey, we're only down by 3. Let's try and find a way to win this game. I just don't think the Cardinals had the coverage of 6 innings today in their bullpen. They needed to try to get Mikolas through a few more. This needed to have been one of those games where, you give up some runs early, but he goes 6 innings and gives up 6 runs. And then maybe you find a way to claw your way back into it late. But instead, it was 4 1/3 innings and 10 runs, 9 of which were earned. He just never did find a way to staunch the bleeding, and that led to what it led to tonight for the Cardinals. Offensively, it was a lackluster day. Only Dylan Carlson with a multi-hit game, so good for Dylan. Did end up with an RBI in this contest as well. He also reached base via walk, so he was on base 3 times. Like to see that. Carlson's average now up to 200, the OPS up to 520. I don't know what it means as far as his near and distant future with this team, especially when you consider that Edman should be coming back before too long. Now, he did have a setback that I forgot to mention yesterday, so I made a note to myself to make sure I talked about Edman's injury-related setback today. But Lars Nootbaar should hopefully be, you're talking by the end of July. Let's not put like too sharp of a timeline on it, but you figure by the end of July, both those guys should be back, right? They'd have to be. So, in that case, what does it look like for Dylan Carlson getting playing time? I don't really know. I kind of think he would be an interesting trade candidate if you can get a good, solid reliever for him from a team that is maybe not contending, or they can convince themselves to sell on a short-term asset for the potential of a long-term gain, because Dylan Carlson is under team control beyond this year. What he would bring to a team, that's up for interpretation. I still think he's a talented player who just maybe, like, he may need a change of scenery, but also if you look at the more recent outings for him, he doesn't have bad numbers of late. It's just been, it was how bad the beginning of the season was for Dylan. But I'm going to check out the splits here. Last 15 games. Last 15 games, still pretty gnarly. .237 average with no power to speak of, .289 slug. But the last 7 games he's played in, I get it, it's a small sample, but he's hitting .353 with a .389 on base and a .471 slug. So that's a little better. How sustainable is that stretch? I don't know, but I just like to see Dylan perform well, and he did tonight. I think he has largely been in a bad situation where he's just not been able to find his way out of the rut. And I think he's a player that has talent and just maybe needs that confidence boost. And I just don't know if he's going to end up getting it long-term here. But that's kind of a side quest conversation. But I wanted to bring it up in the context because as we talk about Tommy Edman, he sprained his ankle taking grounders, which is just like the most, it's not funny, but you just almost have to laugh at the absurdity of it all because he has spent so much time rehabbing the wrist after the wrist surgery that he had, and it's an ankle that now he's got to be off his feet for a couple days, not participatory in baseball activities. You won't see him pre-All-Star break is my prediction. I hope I'm wrong. Going back to March 28th or whatever day it was in late March where we're like, oh yeah, this Tommy Edman thing continues to linger. I made the statement on this show and said, anything you get from Tommy Edman before the All-Star break is a bonus. Anything you get from him in the first half is a bonus. So we're almost at the halfway point. The All-Star break is a little bit beyond the halfway point, and I still think that's going to end up ringing true, but mostly because of the ankle thing that came up out of nowhere. If he had just been able to continue to rehab, maybe he would have been back before the break. Now it seems like it's less likely for that to be the case because that's a guy that he's missed half a season. He needs at least a full week of rehab games, like playing, and then if they're going to put him back in a utility role because you don't really know exactly how often you're going to put him in center field. Is he going to play some second? Like, I have no idea. I would think just shove him into center field and have him split that time with the other outfielders that are out there, and whoever's healthy can take the crack at it. Edman being a guy that offers a blend of upside offensively to just be average, which is, we haven't seen Ciani or Carlson on the whole this season be average offensively. And I think defensively, he's probably a little better than Dylan. Not quite Ciani's level because very few are, but like Edman is a nice happy medium where I feel like if he can get some traction, that would be a way to combine the prioritization of defense that you get with Ciani with maybe a little bit more thump offensively. Have a 700 OPS instead of a 540 OPS, and maybe you're cooking with gas at that point. So we'll see what happens there, but let's go ahead and wrap up the conversation on Miles Mikolas by playing a little bit of the audio from his post-game, courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest. I know people are going, man, I'm frustrated with Mikolas today. Well, let's at least give him a chance to explain what he saw from his perspective in the Cardinals' loss to the Reds on Thursday night. Again, courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest when it comes to this audio.
I haven't went back and looked at a whole lot yet, but just not hitting spots, kind of stunk out there. Bullpen a little short staffed. Today was not a good day for me to stink and, work my tail off in between starts, make sure that doesn't happen again.
Was that in your mind that you wanted to give innings?
No. I mean, I always, my goal is to go 9 innings every time out. I know that doesn't happen, a whole bunch, but today was just a bad day to stink.
Also, when you got out of that first inning, limiting them to just one run, did you feel encouraged that maybe, get it back on track there?
Yeah, my stuff felt okay for the most part, but, some of those pitches I thought were okay. I got to go back and look at them. I really wasn't in the mood to go back and look at them yet. I'll probably wait till tomorrow and go check them out, but, it's just a bad game. They swung the heck out of it. Maybe I was on the ball right down the middle. Maybe my sights were a little off. But, I got some work to do between, now and the next, 5-6 days. And, like I said, I'm going to, work my butt off, make sure that doesn't happen again.
And the Cardinals and their fans will hope it doesn't happen again for Miles Mikolas. And, I don't want to just tear your eye apart for one bad start, but this was a very bad start. And, look, your ERA for the season does tell a tale of the way that you performed. And Miles Mikolas now has an ERA of 5.32. And I've talked about before how the ERA was not necessarily reflective of the job that he had done since, and we continued to hark back to April 26th, because from there it was a stretch that had built up to trying to count through it now, like 10 starts for sure, where really only one bad one in that mix, and every other start was quality start or on par with being a quality start. And then against the Giants, he went 6-4, a little bit below par, and then obviously what happened tonight. He had gotten the ERA down to 4.59 before the Giants start. That was the low water mark, I think, for the season for Miles Mikolas. And that was a little bit more reflective of the way that he was performing. But now it's like he's had, I can count them, 5 really bad starts, a couple of average starts, and then otherwise some good starts. More good than bad, honestly. Looks like he's made to this point in the season 17 starts. Seems like kind of a lot, but he's taking the ball every time. So this is his 17th start of the season tonight. And I would say at least 10 of them have been, at minimum, acceptable, giving you a real chance to win, quality start level or better. And then, the other 5 had been putrid, and then 2 were just kind of maybe middle of the pack, So it's not a high bar that we're asking, I feel like, when we're saying, it had kind of been all right before today. But I also think he had pitched in a way that, like, the Cardinals were winning the majority of his games from April 26th on. Taking a quick look, I count up 7 wins and 4 losses for the team in that 11-start stretch before tonight. So he was keeping them competitive. Not a number 2. I don't think it ever risen back to the level of being a number 2, even as he performed better from, the last month and a half or whatever the time frame is, last 2 months. He never really got back to that number 2 status for me. But you could have made a case that at times he was a solid enough number 3. But this kind of blow up, and these are going to happen. Kyle Gibson, I think, is still probably ahead in the pecking order of Miles Mikolas, but he had a bad start on Wednesday afternoon. And those are going to happen. But you heard from Mikolas say, well, I thought some of those pitches were okay. I mean, really, there's enough pitches that I saw that are just, they're non-competitive. Hanging breaking balls are going to be hammered every time at this level. It's going to be the exception to the rule that those pitches don't get drilled. And then you can also say, well, there were some pitches that I made that weren't so bad but did get hit as well. But it's harder to say that when you also have to consider the 5 or 6 or 7 that, were just beach balls. The curveball that doesn't end up in even the bottom half of the strike zone, but it's like right up there in the mid to the upper quadrant of the strike zone, that's where you just know it's going to be bad news. Because a guy can hit, it's like hitting level, hitting speed, eye level, everything. Everything about it is going to be very conducive to success for hitters. So for as much as I think before tonight, it would have been a little bit much to make bold proclamations about how bad Miles Mikolas has been, because he had been pretty competitive. You can look at, again, before tonight, his last 8 starts had been at least 5 innings, and 7 of the 8 had been at least 6 innings. In none of those starts did he give up more than 4, and in 7 of the 8, he didn't give up more than 3. That's not, we're not talking about him as an all-star, but he was giving the Cardinals a genuine chance to win pretty much every time he pitched. Today was his worst outing of the season, maybe his worst outing of his career with the Cardinals, and did not give the team any semblance of a chance to win the game. And lo and behold, they did not win the game. Cardinals lose it 11-4 to the Reds. And it sucks that it happens this way, because another element that I want to do and I meant to talk about in Wednesday night's podcast was the job that Pedro Pages had been doing behind the plate. And now that narrative is a little bit ruined after today because he caught Miles Mikolas, but he didn't throw those beach balls. He didn't throw those hanging breaking pitches at the top half of the zone. So I'm not going to ride Pedro Pages too much for the outing going not his way. But, when you want to credit a catcher, I guess it's fair to give criticism as well when the starting rotation doesn't perform as capably. But Pedro Pages got some pub and some love from Ollie Marmol Wednesday night for the job he did with Matthew Liberatore. And and again, you see him in the lineup again today with Contreras DHing again. It just goes to show you, I think, how impressed the Cardinals have been with the job that he has done defensively. It is not a knock on Wilson Contreras to say that Pedro Pages is the best defensive catcher in the Cardinals organization. It's a credit to Pedro Pages and how elite he is at that position. He's been really, really good. Obviously, today was a total wash, but I wanted to give him a little bit of love because Ollie Marmol did. And I mean, I set him up. I asked the question of, I understand that internally they are not going to underestimate the job that Pages has done. But I think a lot of times on the outside, we might look at Pedro Pages, we might look at the box score and go, okay, he's hitting 150. He's got a 530 OPS. What's the big deal? Why is he playing so much? I really think if you're watching the way that he frames, the way that he steals strikes, and the way that he calls games and works with pitchers, there's a lot to like. And I think Pedro Pages could be a keeper. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you structure it with Contreras and Ivan Herrera. It's kind of night and day, though, between where Herrera's at. He's got the bat tool. He doesn't have the behind-the-plate tool. And right now he's obviously on the injured list, so that made the interim decision a little bit easier. But you're talking like a couple years out. I don't really know the way the Cardinals want to approach it because Herrera is a player that they're very high on, but the deficiencies with him in managing the running game in particular has been glaring. It's been noticeable. And now they're like, all right, we need Contreras as bad in the lineup. He's our best hitter. He goes 1 for 3 tonight, scores a run, walks twice, and has a nice day at the plate. But it's okay to have somebody else doing the catching. It's just I don't know about Pages in terms of his bat, how often they're going to want to blend that out when they do have Contreras and they're paying him to be the franchise catcher. So how often is he going to get back behind the plate? I don't think it's a desire by him to catch any less. I think the fact that Pages was back in there again tonight was the Cardinals trying to continue to ride that mojo of how well things have been going pitching-wise when Pages is back there. That being said, I think you'll probably see Contreras get back behind the plate on Friday after what happened on Thursday. Again, not pinning that on Pedro Pages by any means, but I think it'll just be a nice transition point for Wilson to have another day behind the plate. But he had 2 consecutive games as the DH, caught the first game of the doubleheader on Wednesday, and then the night games on both days, it ended up going to Pages. So that was just an aspect I wanted to bring up and give some pub to Pedro Pages because he has done a really nice job. And then, of course, it happens that I forget to do it last night when it was relevant. And then tonight, I'm like, hey, remember when Pages was just like helping Cardinal pitching dice everybody up? Well, he didn't do that today, but still, that was the talking point from yesterday that I forgot. The Tommy Edman ankle injury was another one that I forgot. And I also forgot to welcome Mark H. to the b-schaeff Daily Gang, the channel membership. You can join the channel membership as well if you're so inclined. You and 22 of your closest friends. I guess 23 when you count me because I'm in there too. Join the membership. You get a special badge. You help support me in my work. Not that I need the support, but I am apparently losing one of my other jobs right now. I tease about that, but for those who listen to 590 The Fan and Hot Take Central with me and Cam Jansen and Charlie Marlowe and Jimmy the Cat Hayes and all those guys, Cole Bartimas, yeah, that's going away. So by the time you listen to this podcast, if you are late to the game on Friday, you won't be able to listen live to the last ever show. Maybe not last ever, but the last for now, Hot Take Central episode. But I will be there in studio with the guys for one last go-round on Friday morning, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., 590 The Fan. I would say 590thefan.com, but I don't even know. They might have already taken down the website. I don't even know if you can stream it, but I believe the Hot Take Central, well, maybe you can. On my phone, it wouldn't let me get on the website, but it seems to be fine on a browser, on a desktop. Anyway, you can also, Hot Take Central, if you want to listen to the final show on Friday and you don't listen to it in time, I am sure Cole will still put up the podcast on the Spotify feed, so you can just search Hot Take Central anywhere you find your podcast. That is a shameless plug for something that I'm getting nothing out of because they're shuttering the station after Friday. Anyway, that's why you join the channel membership. You know, you help me out a little bit. I'm just playing. But if you want to support the channel, that's how you do it. The link is in the description. And we'll be doing more live streams and some different things to incentivize channel membership down the road. Right now, it's just been a lot to just keep up with everything that's going on doing the daily podcast. But I will find the time, I swear. We've done a nice job, though, b-schaeff Daily, to be a daily podcast this year. For the first time really ever. It's called b-schaeff Daily, but it never really has been daily. This year, I'm basically not taking any days off unless there's an obvious reason to do it, like a rain out where there's no game and there's just nothing going on. And then I'll still plug in some other content on the channel. So, hey, subscribe to the channel too if you have listened this far and haven't done so already. Let's talk about another aspect that I have not really mentioned yet, and that's the news that broke later on Thursday evening. I could spend some time talking about the offense and how it performed for the Cardinals in this game Thursday, but it was another one of those where you're down by so many runs. They had the bases loaded in the first inning, and they couldn't cash in, and then things kind of went off the rails for Mikolas. So I'm not going to read too terribly much into the offense. I did mention the day for Contreras on base 3 times. Carlson did so as well, and Arenado hit a 2-run home run. That was good to see. It comes in a loss in a completely meaningless moment, but it's definitely nice to see. Matt Carpenter ended up playing some second base in this game, which was interesting, and had a diving play to start a double play. So maybe, I don't know if that one play will make the Cardinals go, maybe he's a little more viable there than we thought, but it was at least cool to see because I didn't think we would necessarily see Matt Carpenter at second base at all this year, but in the downside of a big blowout, that I guess was ultimately the case. We did not end up seeing Brandon Crawford in this game, but I saw from Katie Woo, I was not at the ballpark tonight, but I saw from Katie that he was warming up to potentially come in to pitch, which did not ultimately materialize, but would have been a rip-roaring good time had it happened. So anyway, that's about all I have in terms of position players for the Cardinals tonight. John King went 2 innings. Gallegos cleaned up 5 outs, and Ryan Fernandez had to come in for the final inning of work tonight for the Cardinals. But this was actually, you could make the case, good to see from Gio, because it did not really look good for him game 1 on Wednesday. Threw 26 pitches in an inning, scoreless inning, but it was like, I don't know. It still doesn't look very good. This game, though, he goes 5 outs, inning and 2/3, only 1 hit allowed. It has a strikeout. Didn't walk anybody, and got it done on an efficient 18 pitches. So you feel much better about outing number 2 for Gio. But John King, after you had the doubleheader on Wednesday, a lot of those guys pitched yesterday, and then they pitched again today. John King, 2 innings. Gallegos pitched both days. Ryan Fernandez, he did not pitch on Wednesday, but did pitch in the game tonight on Thursday, so should be available probably for Friday. But you could conceivably have a number of guys that are not. It seems to be the revolving door of usage and trying to balance it all out. Because of that, though, the Cardinals are, according to the tweet I saw from Katie Woo, I believe she was the first to report it out. I don't know that it's been officially announced just yet, but she said about an hour before I'm recording this, the Cardinals plan to call up right-handed pitcher Gordon Graceffo ahead of Friday's game against the Reds. Sources tell The Athletic. Initial plan is to use him in relief to help alleviate a taxed bullpen. Graceffo, 5th-round pick in 2021, will need to be added to the 40-man roster, which I don't think is going to be all that difficult because if they wanted to, they could probably take Nick Raposo off. From a roster perspective, it's a little bit of a shame they had to put him on. I'm sure he doesn't feel that way because he got to be up in the big leagues for a couple days. But if the timing of Contreras being back just a little bit sooner would have worked out, then when they put Ivan Herrera on the injured list, they would not have had to have added Nick Raposo to the 40-man. Now to take him off, you would have to clear him through waivers, and you could potentially lose a guy that you've been obviously using as minor league catching depth throughout your organization. So that is something that we'll have to wait and see if happens. I think you also could probably 60-day Steven Matz to be able to take him off the 40-man for the time being, but we'll see what the Cardinals decide to do there as they look to add Gordon Graceffo to the roster. Again, it sounds like, according to Katie, it's going to be as a reliever to begin. Kind of feels like what they did with Adam Kloffenstein a minute ago, but his stint was so short, and you sent him back down, so now he's not eligible to come back up. It feels like a little bit of weird roster management stuff, but I'm not going to complain about this one because I've been saying you might as well get Graceffo up and see what you got. Like, this is the time to be doing it. And then if any of these minor league starters that you haven't been enthused enough about in order to put them into the big league rotation, but you may need some help in the bullpen and you can bring some of these guys up. Again, this is the way that I think it should work, as opposed to when you have a minor league starter that's dealing and you're like, oh, we got to bring this guy up to help out our bullpen. Yeah, but that you're potentially pigeonholing a guy into a role that is not going to take the maximum effect and value of what he can bring to the table. It's not going to take advantage of that. If a guy has not proven that he's not a great starter in the minors, if he's doing well, then why would you necessarily want to take him out of that starting role? Whereas with Graceffo, he's kind of flatlined a little bit at the AAA level. as a starter. Now, he's done some nice work recently. He's got 70 Ks in 75 innings. He's got a 3.84 ERA. Overall, a runs against average at 4.32. So some unearned runs have gotten across against him, as this is the case with everybody. But his numbers aren't terrible. But I wonder if, okay, it might make sense to expose him to the big leagues now and see what happens in an inning or two if you allow him to just let it eat. Maybe he throws suddenly upper 90s and you go, oh, this is a different version of Graceffo than we saw. Maybe he's viable in this role, and it changes what you feel compelled to do at the deadline. I'm not saying it should take the Cardinals off the hook to go out and target relief help in the trade market, but I also could see if you've got guys in-house, you might as well use them. The other side is maybe Graceffo does really well, but you're able to use him then as a more of a centerpiece in a trade that you do want to make as trade bait, because an MLB team got to look at him and say, hey, I don't know if this guy could be a big league starter, but he sure looked viable as a reliever for the Cardinals, and maybe that's the way that you can as the Cardinals trade him on that little bit of promise. I'm not saying that fans would enjoy that if they saw good things from Graceffo. They'd probably just want you to keep him at that point, but if you did it that way, you could end up seeing the Cardinals maybe use him in a more prominent setting of a trade package or whatever the case might be for, say, like a reliable number 3 starter that you feel is a little bit more locked into the probability of being good down the stretch run, which maybe Graceffo could do it too. We have no idea. But his numbers in AAA are okay. He's definitely looked better this year than he did last year, and I think he's been better of late. So the Cardinals are going to go with Gordon Graceffo. Like I said, I have no problem adding him to the 40-man because I think you were going to have to do it anyway after this season because he would have been a fifth-year guy. So you're talking about Rule 5 draft. I think it makes perfect sense to put him on, and you've got some clutter that you could probably still manage to take off the roster if you had to. But I think Steven Matz is not going to be returning 60 days from whenever he went on the IL, so that'll probably be the obvious move is to 60-day Steven Matz. But how do you feel, Cardinals fans? We're finally going to see Gordon Graceffo at the big league level. I don't know if this is going to be like a Kloffenstein where it's just a one-day thing and they're going to have him throw multiple innings rather than, Kloffenstein didn't have to at Rickwood because Palante was able to get semi-deep into the ball game. But do they just want him for a bulk relief appearance and then they're going to send him right back down and then you can continue to cycle guys like Kloffenstein, like Graceffo as time goes on, or does that mess a little bit too much with their development? How do the Cardinals see it? Let me know how you see it, Cardinals fans, and what you'd like to see, what you're hoping to see out of Gordon Graceffo, who is reportedly, according to Katie Wu, going to be making his Cardinals debut very soon, as he is expected to be called up and join the roster on Friday. Well, I know for darn sure there's a topic that I've missed that I meant to mark down and bring up and have forgotten to do so. I think we should take a moment to, as I double back to the conversation about Brandon Crawford, was looking for his first Cardinals pitching appearance. He did appear on the mound once before when he was with the Giants, but he was warming up and probably going to come into this game for the Cardinals tonight until the Cardinals actually scored too many runs to allow for it to happen. Brendan Donovan has been an RBI fiend, and he was able to drive in Michael Ciani after Ciani hit his second triple of the season, and then Dylan Carlson doubles in Donovan to make it 11-4, and that meant you're not down by enough to actually use a position player to pitch. I think it's got to be 8 or more runs before you are allowed to. That's a recent rule addition within the last couple of years, so as not to make such a mockery of the game. I don't really mind it. I think 7, you're down 7 with an inning to go. You're not going to win. Probably should just go ahead and let Ollie Marmol save Ryan Fernandez in this spot. I bet Ollie Marmol, was he actually irritated by the notion that they scored 2 in the bottom of the 8th inning to take Brandon Crawford out of play as a potential relief option? That would be an interesting question. But anyway, that's why we didn't see Brandon Crawford. So thanks for nothing, Brendan Donovan and Dylan Carlson, because you did your job and you hit extra base hits and drove in runs. Michael Ciani, too, he's to blame with the triple that he had setting that thing up. But that's a little bit funny. But other than that, I don't really have a lot to get to anymore, other than to say, check out Hot Take Central in the morning if you're interested. But it's past midnight now, so I should probably go to bed. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Subscribe, consider the channel membership. The link is in the description. And follow on Spotify as well, the B-Schaeff Daily, if you would like to listen to the audio version of the podcast over there. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.